Pahirapan na naman, bawas na naman sa kita. Pati krudo. Kaya rin naman buhay natin ito.
Malulugi din sila kung di sila magtataas ng pamasahe. Pero at the same time, sana magtaas din ng sahod para naman po sa mga minimum lang. Wawa yung mga jeepney driver kasi driver din po yung papa ko. Kaya naiintindihan ko po yung sitwasyon.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Edwin Gao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
Another big-time oil price hike was made effective earlier today, with diesel prices increasing by over 6 pesos per liter.
To combat this, the LTFRB is eyeing a jeepney fare hike come September. Ryan Castillo with the big story.
Hours before another round of big-time oil price hike took effect, motorists lined up at this gasoline station in Quezon City. Taxi driver Radix was among those who gassed up early.
Hindi magpupultang na ngayon para makatipid-tipid.
Jeepney driver Joey likewise feared that increase in oil price will hurt his livelihood.
Pahirapan na naman, bawas na naman sa kita. Pati krudo. Kaya rin naman buhay natin ito.
But good news might soon come their way. The LTFRB revealed that the jeepney fare hike is now inevitable. They say that jeepney fares are already due for an increase as prices of petroleum products doubled since the last approved fare hike in July. For LTFRB officials, it is no longer a matter of whether an increase should be imposed, but rather how much will the hike be. Once approved, minimum fare hike on jeepneys will be standing at around 13 and 15 pesos. For some passengers, however, this is yet another weight added to their burden, as many of them have been struggling with the rising prices of basic commodities.
Hindi po muna sana kasi bagong pasok pa lang po kami sa mga, lalo na yung mga estudyante po.
Some commuters, on the other hand, understand the plight of the transport sector.
Malulugi din sila kung di sila magtataas ng pamasahe. Pero at the same time, sana magtaas din ng sahod para naman po sa mga minimum lang.
Although they are the first to suffer from the smashing prices of oil, some jeepney drivers are surprisingly not in favor of another fare hike. They fear passengers will have difficulty in bearing with the increase as inflation continuously hurts their daily budgeting for expenses.
Ang dapat gawin dyan, bigyan kami ng percent na lang na discount sa mga gas station at mga jeep para yung ibang pasero lang po hindi nahihirapan.
Meanwhile, the LTFRB assures everyone they will strike a balance between the concerns of jeepney drivers and operators and the purchasing power of the riding public. The final amount of jeepney fare hike is expected to be announced by September. For News 5, Brian Castillo, we are One News.
As mentioned earlier, diesel prices will see a huge hike in its price per liter as compared to gasoline. But why exactly? Well, here's what we know. In an interview with 1PH, Energy Department Assistant Director Rodela Romero said that the hike is due to an increase in demand as some countries are already approaching their winter and harvest seasons. Romero added that the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, announced that it will be cutting its production due to the looming Iran nuclear deal. She also mentioned that supply concerns brought by the Russia-Ukraine crisis are also being factored in.
Yung diesel kasi tawag dati noon socially sensitive, kaya ginagamit siya ng public utility vehicles. Sa ngayon kasi, bumaba ang stocks ng diesel sa Europe. Tapos na-deplete pa yung inventaryo. So, ibig sabihin, maraming nangailangan ng diesel. Eh yun nga, may tightness ng supply sa lahat ng klase ng produktong petrolyo, kaya mataas ang pagsipa ng presyo ng diesel.
And here to talk about what the massive oil price hike could mean for jeepney drivers and operators, we have with us Liga ng Transportasyon at Operators sa Pilipinas President Orlando Marquez. Magandang gabi, Ka-Orly, at welcome to the big story.
Gabi sa yung magandang dalaga na yung kasama dyan. Hindi ko alam ang pangalan.
Good evening po, Gretchen po. Gretchen Ho.
Gretchen. Ma'am Gretchen, magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi.
Matalas po ang mata ninyo. Okay. Sir, una-una po, ito, medyo malaki-laki ito. 6 pesos ang increase dun sa presyo ng diesel. Mahigit. Ano po epekto nito dun sa inyong pang-araw-araw na kinikita?
Yung kinikita namin, Sir Ed, Ma'am Gretchen, talagang kinain na naman yung kita ng ating mga tsuper. Doon sa imbis na take home, ay kinain na naman ng mga oil company po ito. Kaya wala naman po tayong magagawa dahil kasi yung batas na deregulation law, sila po ang nagpipresyo kung magkano ang gusto nila. Kaya sana ho ay ibalik na po yung OPSF, yung Oil Price Stabilization Fund. At ang problema natin dito ay wala na tayong gasolinahan na pag-imbakan na kagaya nung araw na mayroon tayong Petron. Ngayon ho, ibininta na po lahat. Kaya ito po yung problema ng sambayan ng Pilipino dahil nga po yung batas na ang nagninegosyo po, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, sana ho magkamali po ako, ay meron po sila ho ng nagninegosyo, yung mga nagpasa ng batas ng deregulation law.
Hey Ka-Orly, kamusta naman po sa pagbabalik ng face-to-face classes? Medyo tumaas po yung demand ng mga tao na sumasakay po ng jeepney, na nagko-commute. Kahit pa paano, naibsan po ba yung mga pasanin po natin ng mga jeepney driver?
Sa totoo lang, ma'am, ay nakatulong naman po yung sa pagdagdag ng pasahero po noong pasukan. Kaya lang ho ay sinalubong tayo ng bagyo. So ang problema lang namin talaga po, ito pong paakyat na presyo ho, dahil naghahatakan po yan, yung presyo ng fuel, pag tumaas, pati yung spare parts tataas po. Pag bumaba yung fuel, hindi naman po bababa yung spare parts. Kaya hindi po kasi balansyado po yung ating batas na umiiral dahil yung batas na deregulation law yung aming bibiliin para makabiyahe kami, pero yung aming pamasahe ay regulation law. Kaya yun po yung sinasabi ko na parang pinag-asawa yung aso at pusa kumo animal.
Ka-Orly, ang intindi ko sa sinabi raw ninyo sa nakaraang interview, parang 16 sana yung gusto ninyong increase dun sa pamasahe. Pero ang sasabi ng LTFRB, kung sakali, baka 2 piso lamang ang kanilang payagan. Kung sakali. Pero yun nga sa inyong pagtitimbang, meron bang middle ground para dito o either or lang to na 12 o 16?
Sa amin, Sir Ed, kami po ay sumusunod po dahil unang-una ho, ay iniintindi rin namin ang ating mga mananakay. Dahil nga po kung kukunin namin yung maximum doon sa base sa fair adjustment formula na ginawa ng LTFRB nung nakarang administrasyon, ay talagang mataas. Kaya lang po naiintindihan po namin na sana po kami ay talagang wag naman pong masyadong matalo dahil yung aming mga driver, nagbalikan sila ngayon unti-unti, baka na naman po kung hindi naman po sila kikita, ay babalik na naman sila sa pagkakalpintero, pagmimekaniko, pagmamason. So marami ho silang alternate na natutunan nitong pandemya po na ito. Kaya yan ho yung ikinakatakot namin dahil unang-una marami pa pong mga jeep natin na hindi tumatakbo dahil sa kakulangan po ng pera na pagpagawa, na pagpaayos sa aming mga jeepney po. Hindi lang sa Metro Manila, kundi sa buong Pilipinas.
Ka-Orly, balanse po yung hinahanap po natin, sa mga nabanggit po nyo, ano po sa tingin nyo yung reasonable na fair hike?
Sa amin po, kung taasan po ng 2 piso, ay mabuti na po yung wala, mayroon kaysa wala. Kaya kami po ay unang-una, maganda naman po ang aming ugnayan dahil hinaharap naman po kami ang ating chairperson at ang ating executive director ng LTFRB, kasama na po yung mga board. Tuwing hihingi po kami ng pag-uusap, ay hinaharap naman po kami lagi. Kaya kami po ay nagpapasalamat dahil po yung bagong chairperson ngayon po na sa Attorney Chiloy Garapil ay tao na humaharap po sa amin. Hindi kagaya noong araw na ayaw kaming harapin.
Well, Ka-Orly, balik ko lang yung una kong tanong kanina, yun sa epekto ng 6 pesos increase na ito doon sa inyong pang-araw-araw. So kung dati, magkano kinikita ng jeepney driver kumpara doon sa bagong presyo ngayon ng krudo?
Kung hahanapin namin, Sir Ed, yung aming kinikita noong araw, talagang malayo po sa kinikita namin ngayon. Kaya lang ho, naintindihan namin, dahil umaangat pa lang po yung ating ekonomiya ngayon, Sir Ed, kaya kami po ay sumasabay para ho mabuhay lang tayo pare-parehas dahil nga po talagang kami ay talagang isinisigaw namin yung sinabi ng ating Pangulo na ay lagi kong inuulit na problema nyo, problema ko. Pangarap nyo, pangarap ko. Kaya kami po ay nakahawak doon sa kanyang sinabi na kami po ay naka-full support sa kanya sa kanyang ginagawa ngayon na nakikita natin dahil nga po sa napakarami nating problema ay marami pa rin nagpasamantala sa atin ngayon na naghuhording ng mga bibilihin natin.
Ka-Orly, kamusta naman po yung mga subsidiya na binigay po ng gobyerno? Ito po ba natanggap nyo na buong buo? At paano po kung hindi po mag-grant yung fare hike at dito na lang mapupunta yung resources, so additional fuel subsidy?
Siguro, Ma'am Gretchen, kami po ay hihingi po ng pag-uusap diyan sa Kongreso at Senado dahil sila naman po ang naglalaan po ng budget. Dahil ngayon po ay nagpapasa po sila ng budget dahil po yung natitirang budget natin ngayon siguro ay baka kulang na po yung ating budget. Kaya kami po ay magtsatsaga po na kung ibibigay po yung dagdag na 2 piso ay malaking pasalamat na po namin. Huwag lang po sanang tumigil po yung aming mga driver na maghanap ng ibang hanap buhay dahil po sabi nga nila yung aking makasamahan kahapon po ay nag-Zoom meeting kami sa buong Pilipinas, yung aking mga membership, na ang sabi po nila ay sana ay pagbigyan naman tayo dahil unang-una po ay gusto na namin talagang magserbisyo at kumita. Pero itong taas na ito talagang naunsyamin na naman po kaya humihingi po kami talaga ng dagdag dahil hindi na namin kaya kung hindi po dadagdagan ng aming pamasahe.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Liga ng Transportasyon at Operator sa Pilipinas, President Orlando Marquez. Sir, ingat po parate. And this just in, the MMDA announces that it will no longer implement the No Contact Apprehension Policy or NCAP. This comes in light of the clarification of Supreme Court spokesman Brian Keith Osaka that the agency is covered by the High Court's temporary restraining order on the implementation of NCAP. Earlier, the MMDA said that it will continue with the program despite the TRO. The High Court says or has set the petitions filed by transport groups and a lawyer for all oral arguments on January 24, 2023.
Join us in the conversation. Our big question tonight: what do you think is a reasonable minimum fare for jeepneys? Share your thoughts on our Facebook and YouTube live stream or post a tweet with the hashtag #TheBigStory. We'll show some of your comments later on in the program. After the break, we'll get the latest on the tropical cyclone outside the Philippine Area of Responsibility, which is expected to enter the country's jurisdiction on Wednesday. That and more when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Back from their to the pre-COVID status quo. Companies like Shopify, Netflix, and most recently HBO are also laying off employees. There are actually more layoffs at tech firms in May than in the last 4 months of the year combined. So what does that mean for where workplace power dynamics are heading? Let's go ask Matt Boyle.
You're basically able to still tell your employer, look, I want a raise or I want some more flexibility to work from home. And if you don't give me that, I'm probably out the door. I think we're going to learn a lot more next month when companies like Apple and Peloton impose return to office mandates. That's going to say a lot about where this balance of power between bosses and workers shakes out.
So there may still be time for you to put in that request to work from home or even ask for a raise that keeps up with inflation.
Commission on Audit is urging the management of the Procurement Service of the Department of Budget and Management to return to the Treasury the 3 billion pesos in dormant funds previously invested in high-yield savings. Based on records reviewed by the COA, the PSDBM invested in high-yield savings account with Land Bank and the DBP. The Commission explained that it is not in the PSC's mandate to make investments and it has no authority to invest in high-yield savings account. And speaking of the PSDBM, newly appointed PSDBM Executive Director Denny Santiago expressed his gratitude to the lawmakers who called out the agency to perform. Recall that Senator Coco Pimentel recently challenged the Budget Department to fix the PSDBM. In a statement, Santiago said it might not be easy to make necessary changes, but he vowed to fulfill their mandate to supply quality products to government agencies at the right price. Santiago said that the calls to abolish the PSDBM must be tempered with the understanding that the agency has a, quote, ably served the government for many decades now.
I noticed that the budget increased.
Meanwhile, Senator Ralph Recto is pushing to reform the Philippine International Trading Corporation or the PITC. Recto said the PITC should go back to its original mandate as a state international trading arm. Despite being given enough funds, Recto also said that the PITC failed to deliver the goods it was contracted to buy. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
The tropical cyclone with international name Hinnamnor has intensified into a super typhoon. It was last spotted nearly 1,500 kilometers east-northeast of eastern northern Luzon, or extreme northern Luzon. It is backing winds of up to 185 kilometers per hour near the center and gusts of up to 230 kph. PAGASA expects the super typhoon to enter the Philippine area of responsibility tomorrow evening. Once it enters the PAR, it will be called Super Typhoon Henry. And here to give us more details about Super Typhoon Hinnamnor is PAGASA weather specialist Grace Castañeda. She's joining us live via Zoom. Welcome to The Big Story, Ms. Grace, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, good evening, Sir Ed and Ms. Gretchen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, kailan po natin mararamdaman ang epekto nitong Super Typhoon Hinnamnor?
Ayon po sa ating latest analysis, magiging malayo yung sentro nito ni Bagyong Hinnamnor sa anumang bahagi ng ating bansa. Ngunit dahil nga nakita natin na malaki yung diameter nitong bagyong to, nakita natin na posibleng mag-extend yung diameter nito hanggang sa bahagi ng extreme northern Luzon, kung saan as early as bukas ng Miyerkules nakita natin yung posibilidad na magtaas tayo ng Tropical Cyclone Wind Signal number 1 sa bahagi ng extreme northern Luzon. Diyan po yan sa Batanes and Babuyan Islands, kung saan diyan po yung makakaranas ng mga malalakas po na hangin na dulot po nito ni Bagyong Hinnamnor. Samantala sa mga pag-ulan din po, posible ding makaranas ng mga pag-ulan na dulot ng mga outer rain bands nitong si Bagyong Hinnamnor, itong mga areas sa extreme northern Luzon.
Miss Grace, ito pong Hinnamnor, no? Iba po ito sa kay Gardo PH. Tapos iba rin po yung Henry PH, no? Magkakasalubong po ba yung dalawang yon?
Yes po, si Gardo, ito po yung nasa loob na ngayon ng ating area of responsibility. Naging tropical depression po ito kaninang alas 2. And si Hinnamnor naman po, nasa labas pa ito ng PAR. And kapag pumasok po ito ng PAR, ito naman ay papangalanan nating Henry. And nakikita natin, possible po silang magkaroon ng interaction kung saan itong si Gardo ay maaring sumama dito sa sirkulasyon ni Hinnamnor or ni Henry nga pagpasok ng PAR sa mga susunod po ng araw. And itong dalawa, si Gardo po maging si Hinnamnor, sa mga susunod na araw po, possible yan as early as Thursday, i-enhance nila yung southwest monsoon na siya pong magdudulot ng mga pag-ulan sa malaking bahagi ng Luzon and also sa ibang bahagi din po ng Visayas.
Ma'am, so sasabi po ninyo, tama ho ba na ang Henry ay maaaring hatakin si Gardo paakyat pa norte? Ganun ho ba?
Yes po, ang nakikita natin, ito pong si Henry yung kukuha or hihigupin niya po itong sirkulasyon ni Gardo. Possible po yan sa mga susunod na araw kapag itong si Henry ay nasa loob na ng PAR.
Okay. Saan po inaasahan ng landfall ni Henry?
Ito pong si Gardo sa si Henry, hindi po natin sila nakikitang magla-landfall sa anuman pong bahagi ng ating bansa. And ang magiging epekto po nito is yung i-enhance nila yung southwest na magdudulot ng pag-ulan sa area ng Luzon at Visayas. And also yung outer bands naman po muli ni Henry, yun lang po yung nakikita natin na makaka-apekto dito po sa bahagi ng extreme northern Luzon.
Ma'am, pahabol lang po. So, tama ho bang sabihin, pakicorrect lang po kung mali tama ho bang sabihin na itong dalawang ito, bagamat hindi sila tatama sa ating diretsahan, magpapalakas ng ulan. Kumbaga, ang maramdaman natin hindi masyadong mahangin, pero medyo malakas sa pag-ulan.
Yes po, tama po. Yung hangin po, yung malalakas na hangin sa areas po ito ng extreme northern Luzon, maging yung pag-ulan na direct na dala nito ni Bagyong Henry or ni Hinnamnor nga po na nasa labas pa ng PAR. And then dito po sa malaking bahagi ng Luzon and also sa Visayas, meron din tayong posible na mga heavy to intense na pag-ulan na mararanasan po. Dulot naman yan na southwest monsoon na in-enhance nito ni Gardo at ni Henry.
Okay, maraming salamat po. PAGASA Weather Specialist Grace Castañeda, thank you for your time. And more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News.
Haizi is a father in his 30s. He's just one of hundreds of thousands of homebuyers caught up in China's property crisis. For his safety, we're not using his real name or voice. A government crackdown on the country's debt-saddled property firms has led to a serious cash crunch for some of his biggest developers.
How big of a problem is this?
A real crisis of confidence.
Have we seen the worst of it?
As they run out of money, construction of apartments have taken years longer to finish, or in some cases, come to a halt altogether. Homebuyers like Haizi were left in the lurch, servicing a monthly mortgage after handing over a 30% down payment for homes still under construction. Frustrated and desperate, homebuyers vented on social media, eventually boycotting their mortgage payments.
We've now seen boycotts on mortgage payments across more than 320 unfinished projects in over 100 cities in China. The speed and the scale of the protests has taken many by surprise in a country where social dissent is typically relatively small in scale and relatively localized.
Haizi lives in Zhengzhou, a city that has seen payment boycotts on over 60 unfinished housing projects.
回到郑州以后，也一直在观察，想买一个位置比较好一点的，就是说考虑到孩子上学什么嘛，我孩子相对也比较小，到24年才到这个上学年龄，所以说就在2020年的时候买的这套房子。全面停工应该发生在去年，就是2021年年底12月份。刚开始嘛，大家也没有头绪，到那个高新区住建局去送这个上访的资料啦，向领导们表达诉求啦。5月底6月儿童节前后，还组织了几次到 CBD 的夜跑活动，因为上面穿了一个带有西塘 logo 的西塘加油，就带这4个字，其他没有。跑步的3天也是警车全程追随，然后最后一天被拦下来不让跑了，不让跑，那后边也就没再跑过。觉得这些传统的方法也不太有效，并且就是风险比较大，最终大家就是自媒体嘛，就自己这些。
You're still watching The Big Story here in One News. Today marks the first celebration of the National Press Freedom Day, but for many journalists all over the country, there's not much to celebrate about as they continue to face attacks and harassment. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us the front seat to the story.
Journalists all over the country commemorated the first National Press Freedom Day against the backdrop of declining trust, the increasing attacks against the media, falling revenues, and an increasingly polarized audience. Before stepping down, former President Rodrigo Duterte signed RA 11699 into law, declaring August 30 as National Press Freedom Day. Ironically, Duterte himself has been criticized for his antagonism towards the press and for his role in rallying allies to deny an extension of the broadcast franchise of ABS-CBN.
In the media landscape, our current situation, of course, generally it's very hostile, left and right, yung mga attacks.
The National Union of Journalists of the Philippines noted an uptick in attacks against journalists. The group says since 2016, 26 journalists have been killed, 32 have been red tagged, which endangered their lives, and 20 news websites have been attacked to become inaccessible. NUJP also reported 56 libel and cyber libel cases against journalists, most filed by government officials. Majority of such harassments are experienced in the province, with female journalists having it far worse, with threats of rape.
Or to just simply adhere to whatever official line there may be when it comes to policies and programs, and they would just quote hook, line, and sinker what the government claims, even if some of the claims may be considered disinformation already.
Kim Kitasol, editor in the Baguio-based alternative media Northern Dispatch, was sued for libel in April 2020. But she wasn't even made aware of this till months later when there was already an arrest warrant for her.
Imagine how I felt when I realized that he could have just arrested me anywhere in all those press conferences that I have attended.
Kitasol was never arrested though, and the case was dismissed this April. Then recently, the National Telecommunications Commission ordered the blocking of the news websites of alternative media Bulatlat and Pinoy Weekly. A QC court eventually lifted the blockage. Still, the fallout of the red tagging is still left.
The trick really is to keep going and to keep fighting and to keep pushing back. Journalism, the defense of discourse, and the defense of democracy will have to come from us as well.
Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Gilas Pilipinas ends the fourth window of the FIBA World Cup qualifiers on a high note, crushing Saudi Arabia 84-46 in front of over 19,000 fans. Marty Bautista with the story.
After getting sidetracked against Lebanon, Gilas Pilipinas is back in the winning column after picking apart Saudi Arabia 84-46. Jordan Clarkson came out hot, churning out 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists in a blowout that sent almost 20,000 fans at the Mall of Asia Arena into a frenzy. Gilas was even trailing by 3 after the first quarter, before finding their footing and turning it into a one-sided affair since. Locals backstop Clarkson led by Kai Soto's 16 points, 13 rebounds and 4 blocks, and Dwight Ramos' 9 points and 6 boards. The win saw the Philippines improve to a 3-3 win-loss record, while Saudi fell to 1-5. Clarkson also defended coach and Gilas' program manager Chot Reyes, who got some boos from the crowd during the introductions.
He's our coach. He's one of us. He works hard. He puts all this together. From what I've been hearing, he walked away from the game. He came back. He ain't got to deal with none of.
Reyes, on the other hand, doesn't seem to mind the criticism and says he's more focused on the game.
But as long as I can inspire 1 or 2 individuals, then it's all worth it. And as long as we have the players together in that locker room. So for me, I'd much rather get booed by the crowd than the players get booed.
Meanwhile, the crowd was also star-studded, with President Marcos appearing in his first sporting event as chief executive. Senators Bongo, Francis Tolentino, and Bato de la Rosa were also in attendance. The next window of the qualifiers is expected to take place in November. Reyes says the Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas will see to it that there will be a team for the fifth window, even if several leagues like the PBA, UAAP, and Japan B-League resume. For News 5, Marty Bautista, we are One News.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analysis. I'm Ed Lingao.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.